I started Curzio Research to help the little guys. Mom-pop investors, millennials, help them stay ahead of Wall Street. I've been through the grinder in this industry, having over 25 years experience, which includes actually working on Wall Street, right across the New York Stock Exchange. Managing money with my late dad, who had over 30 years of experience managing money and writing newsletters. So I grew up into this business. Working side by side with Jim Cramer for 5 years. And working for the largest independent financial newsletter publisher in the world for another 5 years. But I've seen it all. To the point where I can teach you how to avoid all the BS storylines, the pump and dump schemes, tell you who's full of crap and who isn't. Teach you how to research stocks like a pro, learning from my mistakes. If you're a subscriber to any one of my newsletters are at Curzio Research Advisory, Curzio Venture Opportunities, Crypto Intelligence. I used to send out 10-page reports of all my research in PDF, but now we changed that format pretty much a year ago, 9 months ago, and made it a video format. And sometimes these videos take 30 to 40 minutes. You might think it's boring, it's crazy, you won't watch it, but trust me, in those videos, I share everything with you. I'm sharing my screen. I'm showing you exactly why I'm recommending a stock. I'm not just throwing out a note to you and saying, hey, buy this. I'm showing you what sources I use, which can be very, very expensive that most people don't have access to. Just like if you're a professional in your field, you have access to the best tools, the best products. Same here. I go over my methodology, which is different for every pick. Sometimes it'll be based on value, sometimes growth, sometimes income, sometimes momentum. I'll highlight different metrics that matter depending on the company or industry. It's not the same metrics all the time. You can say sales and earnings trends. Yeah, of course. But if sales and earnings are going a little bit higher, but your subscription growth is going lower, your stock's probably going to get nailed, especially your social media company, because they're based on subscriber growth. So are streaming companies. Average revenue per user. Very, very important. How much everyone's paying for that service. Same store sales is the biggest thing for retailers. And your same store sales go through the roof. Usually you're going to beat your earnings, but that's a big number you want to see. Insider buys. Which ones you need to pay attention to and which ones are not really that relevant. There are some that really don't matter. Show you why it's important to pay close attention to the consensus estimates, which is what? It's the sentiment of what the street, Wall Street, thinks about a stock. When I say Wall Street, it's all the analysts, institutional analysts who cover the stock. They all come out with their consensus estimates, and then you come up with the mean and what they're going to generate for the quarter, and sometimes they could be super conservative. So, you could see on TV, when you watch on TV that, JP Morgan just beat their number, or Google just beat their number. That number is the JP Morgans, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanleys that cover the stock. They all provide their estimates. So a lot of times you'll see, well, they beat the consensus estimates, the stock will go up, but those estimates are so low, they're still, from last year to this year, some companies have seen revenue decline 30%, but they beat the estimate, so the stock's going to go higher. But it's important to understand the consensus estimates. Because if you think the street is wrong, that's how you make the biggest returns, by going against the crowd. In these videos, I also provide a buy up to price on every stock, as well as a stop loss. You always want to limit your risk. But you see my entire process for picking a stock, which includes in-depth analysis on every single name I recommend. So I'm not just sending you, hey, here's a text, a quick note telling you to buy Caterpillar because it crossed a 200-day moving average and it's a buy. Information you can find on over 100 free sites that people love paying for. Again, that's one of the ways I highlight when people are bullshitting you. Why should be paying people to give you that information that you could find on 100 free sites? But for me, I love helping people. It's what my late father did with his business. It's what Kramer does. A lot of people have different opinions of him. Believe me, he cares about people. I know this is a guy that went to my wedding, helped me out tremendously in my career. I've seen how mad he gets in his office when he gets things wrong, and he's not allowed to own these securities. So he's getting mad, which I like to see because that means he cares. If he didn't give a shit, he'd go out, go to dinner. Who cares? And I see that a lot in this industry. People just shout to the top of the moon their thesis. They won't even look at any of the facts. It's always the same thing. Inflation, 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 inflation for 15 straight years. The market's going to crash, 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 crash for the last 10, 12 years. Revising that book. Doesn't matter about the data. Doesn't matter low interest rate. They don't care. In the meantime, they're selling books. They're making a fortune. You listen to these people and you're getting crushed. You can see I'm passionate about that. And helping people, doing the right thing by investors has allowed me to grow my network into one of the biggest in my industry, where I interviewed well over over 1,000. Think about that. Over 1,000 market experts, analysts, economists, scientists, doctors. I mean, you heard it all. If you've been listening to this the past 13 years, I've been doing this. Billionaires. I think it's 5 or 6 now interviewed. And helping the little guy also makes me feel good. I mean, it brings me joy. I know that sounds so corny, but it allows me to sleep well at night. It allows me to look in the mirror and be proud. It gives me a sense of pride when it comes to my 2 young daughters, right? Knowing that they're always watching me. It's important to me. Yet the process of bringing you that information, which you see, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm recommending, right? That's what you see. Behind the scenes, everything that happens and things you don't see, this process is kind of ruthless. It requires asking a lot of questions to management teams. It requires boots on the ground, traveling to see facilities, mining sites, where I'll look at the management team in the eye and tell them, you know what, there's no way I'm recommending your company to my subscribers. It's not good enough. And believe it or not, that happens much more than not. Because most of the stocks I research aren't going to make it into portfolio. And unfortunately, when I'm going through that entire process, it could take a few days before I realize, wow, this isn't a good name, or something really, I didn't see during the early stage of the research where I'm like, wow, this doesn't make sense. It happens a lot. I'll get to, if there's put in baseball terms, in innings, I mean, I'd get to the 7th inning in a stock, and then I'd be like, oh, you know what? This doesn't work. It's not going to work in that process. Sometimes you see it right away. Other times you really have to dig deep. It involves talking to people who have an opposite opinion than you, which is not easy for most people to do. I mean, think about that, right? Say if you believe in climate change, try having a conversation with someone who couldn't care less and thinks you're absolutely crazy and wasting your time. It's not easy. It's not easy. And so many of those times, those conversations don't go well when you're talking to someone who just thinks different than you. Since, we're all biased in one way or another, especially if you're running your own company, and that includes me. If one of my competitors told me to my face that Curzio Research will never become an industry leader, you run a crappy company, I mean, I'll tell them to go F themselves. Just like any one of you would say the same thing, right? But finding the best stock ideas, the ones that have the most upside potential, usually come when you challenge the consensus or what everyone believes, which almost always leads to tons of criticism, doubt, anger, and sometimes feel strongly enough about something and say, if I have the opposite opinion than you, it could result in me losing you as a subscriber. You cancel your subscription, which happened numerous times over my career. I can't control that. I don't have an agenda. My job is to make you money. That's it. I don't get paid for anything else. It's subscriptions, and if we don't make money off subscriptions, if you don't subscribe to my newsletter, we don't make money. So I have to show you returns. We don't get paid by companies that recommend them. Absolutely not. I've been offered numerous times. Absolutely not. Integrity is far, far more important than that. But for me, I've always learned, and I don't know if it's a personality thing, but I always check my ego at the door. I mean, I always welcome debate. I love hearing the other side because that information is critical. It's either going to lead to me strengthening my thesis or force me to dig deeper to find out what I'm missing. If you're subscribed to Curzio Research, you know I'm not bullshitting you here because I always mention a bare thesis in my analysis, in my videos. I tell you, this is what they think. Here's why I think differently and why this stock could take off. In fact, if you're bullish on any stock, you better understand the bearish argument. You better understand it well. Don't just look at the positives. You need to look at the negatives. or how much you could lose on your investment if you're wrong, because you're going to be wrong. Everybody is wrong sometimes. You will, and you're going to be wrong on the ideas that you have the most conviction on. It's just the way it is in this industry. The ones that you get scared of when people are emailing you, you're like, oh, shit, did I mess this up? What am I not seeing? Those are the ones you're going to be fine on. It's the ones that you're arrogant about. Hey, this is definitely going to go higher. This is definitely going to crash. All this stuff. That's when you get nailed. But you want to look at both sides, right? It's critical to everything you do. Look at both sides of that equation. For example, if you want to buy JP Morgan or Wells Fargo, it just reported, you better understand that profits are going to be hurt from low interest rates, which are here forever. Which means that these companies better find another way to make money, and they really can't right now. They really can't. Unless the economy gets better and stronger loan growth, you're seeing those provisions go higher. Those provisions are put aside for credit losses that could potentially happen. I wouldn't say likely, that could potentially happen. And take my Citigroup recommendation, which I recommended in 2018, which we sold for pretty decent profit just before the March COVID crash, which is really like the last week of February. But I love Citigroup because they're buying back nearly 30% of its float over a 4-year period. Also using money to increase its dividend. I mean, their money on their balance sheet, it was super strong, like most banks, because of the regulation, which turned out to be a good thing with COVID, right? Helped these guys a lot. Never thought companies would shut off their revenue streams by 90% to 100% over a 3, 4, 5 month period. No one ever models for that. Trust me, nobody. Fed won't get credit for that. They always get criticized, but nice job. I was pissed off that the banks had so much capital on the balance sheets and they couldn't do shit with it. They couldn't lend it out. I mean, I even had trouble getting a second loan, even though I showed everything that I could easily pay for that for a second mortgage to buy my mom a house. I had to pay cash. I'm like, are you kidding me? You see everything. You see everything here. But anyway, I like Citigroup because of it. Didn't matter if interest rates are staying low because they're buying back their float. Earnings were going to surge. And the stock did well. And we sold out of it, again, pre-COVID. And I think we sold out of it. It was in February at over $63 a share. Today it's $44. But today, Citigroup is no longer buying back their stock. Their balance sheet is not as strong. I mean, given those provisions, just like the rest of the big banks, they put aside for potential credit losses, not raising their dividend. Okay, those are the biggest factors that supported my thesis. So it's not something I would recommend today since the landscape is different. My point here is, if you're long or short, you better understand the risks of being wrong or how much money you could lose. And the only way you're going to know that, you're going to understand it, is by embracing the other side. Listen to the opinion of someone who differs from you. Challenge everything. That's what defines American culture. It's what this country was founded on, debating to find the best outcome or solution to make this country a better place. Where am I going with this? You guys know I've been following me since January. A lot of you have been following me for decades and many years, and some are getting lots of new listeners. Thank you so much for trying this out, and hopefully we'll fulfill your investment needs. We'll promise you're going to get information on this podcast you're probably not going to find on any other podcasts or a lot of other places. But since January, I've been covering COVID relentlessly, almost more than any other analyst in the entire industry. Again, I'm not an arrogant person. I'm just being truthful. I talked to dozens of doctors, read hundreds of studies, reports, interviewed people on lockdown in Italy, China. Now it's in March. Talked to numerous sources in China. Includes business owners, influential people that happen to be Wall Street Unplugged listeners. This is a global podcast. I'm honored that it goes out to a lot of countries. But having that network helped us get out of the market before the crash. And I even did a special podcast in early February where I did not have a guest. Now, I can count on one hand the amount of times I haven't had a guest on my podcast in 13 years. Rarely happens. And I came on and said, look, I don't want to have a guest on. This is a special podcast, Wall Street Unplugged, because nothing that they're going to say is more important than what I'm going to tell you right now. I actually said that. This message is important, and we could see an imminent crash in the stock market, something I never said in my 25-year plus career. And this was based on China closing its entire economy. And it seems obvious. Right? You had Apple, Yum Brands, Levi, Starbucks, hundreds of chip companies that supply the world's biggest entertainment products, or the biggest selling entertainment, like the iPhone, Galaxy, flat screen TVs, car components. Every business in the biggest growth market in the world was closing down due to COVID. And this was public information. Companies made these announcements in early February, before the market started its downturn nearly 3 weeks later. You can look at the news. Look when Apple started shutting its stores, Yum Brands. Look, it's early February. Market started crashing around the 20th. They were trading at a huge growth multiple in the U.S. because U.S. was doing great, doing fine. Yet, it was shutting down the country that accounted for over 40% of the world's growth in 2019. So the math didn't add up. But by challenging the consensus, because nobody predicted an imminent market collapse due to COVID in February or even into March, until the market fell more than 20%. I didn't see anybody. Maybe. Again, I've been wrong on calls too, but this one I haven't seen anybody make. Telling you to get out of market 3 days before it crashed, 3 weeks before it crashed. But challenging the consensus, believing in my in-depth research, my due diligence, I was able to save people a lot of money, which is something I'm really proud of. It's the reason why you listen to this podcast, the reason why you subscribe to my products. It's my job. It's what you pay me for. And I got to tell you something. It's always better to save people money than make people money. As crazy as that sounds. Because anyone get a few picks right, and that's okay. But helping people avoid a massive loss, they will follow you forever. Just that you care about them. Because there's nothing in it. If I'm recommending something that's a buy and I'm investing in it, it's great. But say if I'm avoiding something, that there's no benefit for me by telling you that. You're going to be out of the market. But then if it happens and you save money, that's a real big deal. It's almost like that person has your back. We really strengthened our brand during COVID. But that's why I find it incredibly interesting when I post data about COVID on my social media feeds, even talk about it on this podcast. Because when I do, I get tons of negative feedback. Which is okay. I like the criticism. That's fine. But almost like these people believe I have an agenda. Guys, I don't have an agenda. I don't care about anybody out there. I mean, I don't. If my research tells us what we should do or how do we make money, I don't care if it's one of my best friends who's a great analyst. It doesn't matter. This is about you. This is about my business. You're going to have a difference of opinion, even if you're friends sometimes. But I don't have an agenda. I just have access to information that's public, that's not being published in mainstream media, that a lot of people don't see. Like 94% of the 216,000 Americans who died from COVID since February, it's a tragedy, they also had at least one underlying condition. 94% of those people. And most of them had more than one underlying condition, whether it be asthma, obesity, respiratory problems, or like if you're under the age of 15, you have a much greater chance of dying from the flu than from COVID. Those statistics can be found on the CDC website. People get pissed when you say that. It's not the flu. It's not the flu. We're learning more about it. There's more information out there. But based on this data, my research, talking to people, that's why I've advocated strongly for schools to open back up. And believe me, I have a lot of stake saying that. I think the daughter has Crohn's. She's taking Humira, which lowers her immune system. But based on the data, the protocols I saw that her school was taking, which are great, wearing masks, separating the desks, my wife and I decided to send her and my 12-year-old to class, which was 2 months now. Best decision ever. My daughters are interacting with their friends. Most of them are new friends since they're attending new schools this year. They're smiling, laughing, calling each other to help with homework assignments. They come home, they talk about their day with me, their friends in school. It's a necessity for kids during their growth process, being interactive with people. We've all been through it, at least most of us. But you need those interactions. And of course, not at the cost of safety. But again, the numbers, the data show that kids not only show mild symptoms, most of them, when they get infected with COVID, but also rarely transmit the disease to adults. These are the studies. And it's not just kids Under 15, anyone under 50 with no underlying conditions should view COVID like the flu, or where you definitely don't want to catch the virus, but if you do, you're going to be okay within a few days. That's what happens to most people. Not everyone, but most. 99.5%. And like him or hate him, our president is 74. I'm going to be nice and say mildly obese. So he's in the danger zone, has underlying conditions. Worst candidate gets COVID, and it's fine 5 days later. Yes, he's the president. Yes, he receives special treatment. That treatment will be available to every American, and most of those treatments are available right now. And I'm bringing this up because I've been doing a lot of research on one particular aspect of COVID, one that's highly controversial, angers a lot of people. And we've seen people fly on airplanes because of this, and supermarkets curse and wish death on each other over this topic. And I'm not kidding. And that topic is wearing masks. You go back in March, see Fauci and other infectious doctors, including members of the CDC, again in March, said that masks are never going to work. Now, they changed their tune after looking at studies done in April and May, which you're supposed to do as scientists. You want to be able to get this thing right. You're going to be wrong. This is something new. We don't want to pick on the people who were wrong at the beginning unless they're touting how great they are and how they handle the situation, when most people at the higher ups on both sides did not handle this correctly, right? We all know that, but it was new. We get it. This never happened. This never happened like we'll have lockdowns every place. But you look at a Fauci CDC, right? They changed their position on masks, which you're supposed to do as scientists, so be willing to change your thesis based on the data or the new data that comes out. But studies are all over the place on this now, like in most areas of COVID. I mean, did you see the estimates of people who are asymptomatic or those who are infected but never develop any symptoms? I mean, I read papers where the percentage of Americans, it ranged from 18% to 80%, depending on which study you read. I mean, what does that tell you? 18% to 80%? Give me a break. Really? That's the opinions? Doesn't get crazy or wider than that, right? Not too much wider anyway. If we take the average from 16 major studies that are from unbiased sources, they've said anywhere from 40% to around 45% of people are true asymptomatic, but they're still not sure if these people can transmit the disease. Again, another debatable topic. Whichever side you're on, it's okay, but it is debatable. Now, when it comes to masks, of course, these help droplets from getting into your mouth, breathing them through your nose when you're talking to someone who is infected with COVID. Most are in agreement with that. But droplets are pretty big, and you really have to be standing within 1 to 2 feet of someone, unless they're shouting at you, to get droplets from their mouth into yours. But when it comes to aerosols, where smaller particles can stay in the air for seconds, studies show that most masks won't stop these particles from penetrating. They could easily bypass face masks. And this is based on a study from the Cleveland Clinic, which a lot of people respect. And we saw a study come out from Health Affairs, and this is from June 26, that said it's evident that masks work. And their research is based off the growth rate in COVID cases after we mandated mask use, which was whenever? May? So this study's from June, when most of the lockdowns were still in place. So, of course, if people are at home, COVID rates are going to go down if people are home. But if we fast forward to today, more and more people are wearing masks than ever. You see people with masks everywhere. Not everyone, but you do. You see everywhere. But yet the cases of COVID are rising. Now, if you're political, you're going to say, well, that's because Trump is holding rallies and mostly people not wearing masks. You look at the recent rallies, look at the crowd. Almost everyone in the crowd is wearing a mask. Some people aren't. Most of them are. For me, I'm interested in getting the truth, the facts, the data here. No agenda, no politics. And right now, I've not read many convincing studies showing that masks or mask use prevents the spread of COVID. I'm going to get tons at frankcurzioresearch.com. I'm going to get all these emails. You're crazy. Send me studies, because a new study's just come out from 11 major outpatient healthcare facilities. This is across numerous states, and this study analyzed a group of people who tested positive for COVID during the month of July. It's a pretty big group, too. Because I really criticize people who are like, well, COVID's not working for these 5 people that I interviewed. Remember that on CNBC that had that? What a joke. There's, what was it? I think 14,000 in one trial, another 10,000 another trial. They interviewed the 5 people that fit their thesis that said, oh, I feel sick after, in phase 3 of the trial. Give me a break. This is 800 people. 800 people, 18 years old. So I'm not talking about 20 or 50, 800 people who were infected. Of those infected, 70% of them said they always wore a mask, while 14% say they wore a mask often throughout the day before becoming infected. Think about that for a minute. It's 84% of people who wore masks, including 70% of that number who said they wore masks all the time, and they still contracted the virus somehow. Now, I know several people personally that have COVID who are in the danger zone. So they're over 70 years old, and they wore masks every day. And I'm talking about these personalized masks that covered their whole face to where you could barely hear them talking, which is good. They want to be protected. They're in a danger zone. These people wore these masks religiously. They all got COVID. And most are doing okay, with the exception of one who had underlying conditions. She's not doing well, and my prayers go out to her. She's the wife of my daughter's former principal. Very nice lady. But I'm seeing more and more people who are wearing masks contract COVID. And where am I going with this? I'm not telling you not to wear masks anymore. I'm wearing a mask at every place I go to that's publicly, that's indoors. I'm doing this because it makes people who are in the danger zone feel more comfortable. Not because I'm afraid of catching COVID, which I'm not. I don't have any underlying conditions. My daughter catches it. We could take her off Humira for a few weeks. That's what the doctor said, since it's a very small dose right now. But I'm not worried. I'm not telling you not to wear masks, but the purpose of this segment is you should always be allowed to challenge the status quo. When has this changed in America, where people's opinions based on tons of research and data and doing the work, they totally get dismissed unless it supports someone's agenda? And bring this back to finance and investment research. Imagine if I couldn't challenge the consensus with stocks, how to follow the advice of Wall Street, these institutions that are biased given they generate investment fees from companies they provide research for. You don't get more bias than that. Imagine if we weren't allowed to challenge that. We're allowed to say who's full of shit, which one of the things I'm doing, if you're a Curzio Research Advisory member, shorting our first stock. A couple of big hedge fund managers own it. 2 of the best hedge fund managers own it. And I think they're going to be wrong. Doesn't get more controversial than that. Challenging 2 people I really respect, I've talked about often. This is the first short I've had in Curzio Research Advisory, maybe the second. But you got to be willing to challenge the consensus. Always be willing to listen to the other side. And you do that with your investments, right? When you make them, you should be doing that as a business owner, because listen to the risks. The other side are going to help you prepare for them or help even avoid them, which could result in a lot of your competition going under and you becoming an industry leader. Whoever survives on the other end, we've seen that with countless market crashes and recessions. And look at the leaders after the tech crash. Amazon's, Microsoft's. Reason why they have such strong balance sheets, because they lived through that time where they almost went under. But keep an open mind to what's going on, no matter who you support, what Democrat, Republican. No, it gets crazy. I mean, emotions get nuts right now. And I get it. I understand it. But in the end, the only thing that matters is you and your family. And I can assure you, politicians don't give a shit about that. They give a shit about themselves. They give a shit about power. And think about it. We can't even come up with a stimulus plan because we're arguing between 1.8 trillion and 2.2 trillion. I don't know what's in there and who favors whatever, but what I know is that there's people that are really struggling out there, and they need it. They need this money. And you're looking at restaurants. Yes, some of them are open. We're open here in Florida, one of the first since May. These guys aren't past 75% capacity. They have the table spread out still. A lot of these restaurants, bar owners, gyms, they only make money after that 85% capacity. They're not even there yet. They can't survive much longer. They're okay. They're afloat. Some businesses are thriving, but others aren't. But you really can't come to an agreement if they really cared about the people. And you think they come to that agreement if they cared about families? It's not. But do your own homework. Challenge the consensus. Don't believe everything you read or hear, including me on this podcast. Research everything. Fact check it. Because at the end of the day, if we find out that masks really don't work, or we don't really need them anymore, our economy is going to open up much quicker. It's going to be a big boom to so many stocks that have underperformed the markets, like airlines, cruises, casinos, even the oil industry, anything travel related. So pay attention to it. Don't dismiss it because you're watching someone that says otherwise or because you read one study out of 50. Keep digging and do the homework. I don't mind the criticism. FrankCurzioResearch.com. I'm here. That's okay. But again, I don't have an agenda. I'm trying to help you guys out. Been covering COVID since January. We've done a very, very good job. I feel like we're still ahead of the curve in everything that we've been saying. I take pride in this. But do your homework. Even if you disagree with someone, doesn't mean you have to hate them. Call them names, whatever. Just do the homework. Do your research. Keep digging. At the end of the day, it's only going to make